Hello, my name is Bob Walters, and today we're going to talk a little bit about how Verify can help optimize the returns process for both you and for your consumers. So first thing I'd like to do is open up a slide presentation. Very first thing to keep in mind is that when we're working with our retail customers, though they might recognize the fact that they've got a return problem, they're concerned about the consumer experience. And from our perspective, that is entirely valid, and you should keep an eye on that. So one of the things we strive to do with our Verify solution is actually give consumers a better, more reasons to actually buy. And we try to do this by making sure that as quickly as possible, we're approving all of your valid returns. We can't become a bottleneck in the process. We also work with clients that are trying to address the problem by allowing them to, in some cases, create a more friendly return environment. Because Verify uses models and not policies, it's possible that you can do things like eliminate restocking fees or extend your receipt age limits. Because if you're doing some of those types of things to protect yourself against fraud and abuse, Verify's use of modeling can do that for you without those policies in place. The big objective for us is to make sure that we're not harming your good clients. Your good customers are coming in and making returns. And so what we do is we use the modeling to look for those statistical outliers that are causing you problems, and that allows us to leave your best customers alone. And as is the case with most of our retail customers, their biggest wish is that they could identify their best customers and treat them as such when they're in the store, whether they're making a purchase or a return. This is something that's important for you to understand as a retailer. A lot of times you think about returns and there's a negative connotation. Of course there is, because you've lost revenue. But what you probably see if you look through your own data is that your best customers, the ones that spend the most money, are often the ones that also make the most in terms of returns. Their net contribution financially to the business is strong, but they make a lot of returns. This is the group of people on this far left-hand side, your top 20% of your customers, you would never want to decline. It's when you get over here to the far right-hand side of this graph that you would start to pay attention to and become concerned in terms of the riskiness of those return transactions. And so it's illustrated even further if you take a look at a statistical distribution. Now, this happens to be for one of our clients, and you'll notice that if you look at this black vertical line on 4, and it's a little tough to tell because this is dense in terms of the number of transactions, but the vast majority of your customers are going to live down here in this bottom right-hand quadrant where they're only making a couple returns in a couple of different stores. Where you start to get some concerned is when you get people that are starting to be part of this statistical distribution out here in the far right-hand side. This is an illustration of individuals that don't look anything like your typical consumer. And so they're the ones that you're going to want to pay attention to. The issue, though, here is that not everyone necessarily that's in this quadrant is a problematic returner. It's just that their activity is significant. And perhaps the reason for that is because of their purchase activity. And this next graph is an illustration of that. So if I looked at that previous slide and only paid attention to those people that made 4 or more returns, which was in this particular case an unlikely scenario for the retailer, you'll see that a vast majority of these particular consumers are actually profitable to the business. And so if you were dealing simply with a system that looked at recency or frequency, there's a pretty good chance that these individuals would have their transactions declined. In our case, what we do is look at the totality of their behavior in the store. And it wouldn't be until you started to get into this yellow or yellow-orangish looking area or the red area that we would say that there's something perhaps that we would want to do to be able to address the risk associated with those transactions. That's important. Modeling lets you do that. Again, if you have a strict policy or if you're using recency and frequency, a lot of these people will be declined, and they're very valuable customers. So you're not going to want to do that. The way the system works is that the shopper comes into the store. A typical scenario for our clients is if it's a receipted return, we just scan the barcode on the bottom of the receipt, and we use that as an identifier for that particular returner. If, however, it's a non-receipted return, then we're normally going to prompt for some form of an ID, and it could be Typically, it'd be a driver's license, but it could be a loyalty card or some other identifier. And then we would use that, and the system real time would go out and hit our database, look at the total activity for the consumer, and then make a decision to either approve it, warn it, or deny it. To give you some sense of statistically what that looks like, and this is pretty consistent across all of our customers, you're going to see almost 99% of your returns are going to be approved. And you normally, from that distribution beyond that, you'll see probably 0.75% that get warned. We issue warnings first for most of our clients. In some states, it's actually a requirement. The warning essentially says you can return the item, but future returns might be declined based on your activity, or we would flat out deny it. So in a normal distribution for us across 1 million returns, you're going to see probably a little bit over 1,100 that are, or 11,000, I should say, that are warned and denied. If somebody doesn't like the decision that gets rendered, they would typically make a call into the call center. The distribution for that tends to be around 600 for every 1 million calls. Of those 600 people that make those calls, some of them are going to say they want additional information. When that information is requested, what we send them is a return activity report. So of the 1 million returners, the 600 calls, we'll get about 75 to 80 that will actually ask for that report. That report shows them the reason why the transaction was declined or warned. And then if they still don't like the information, they can file a dispute. Typically, that ends up being about 1 in every 1 million return transactions that we process. To give you some sense of the financial contribution to your business, a typical retailer with $1 billion in sales and a return rate of 8% is going to see a net sales preservation of about $5.5 million. That's using a 6.25% return rate reduction. Historically, our clients are seeing a return rate reduction that's in the 8.2% range. The other thing that's going to happen, if you think about it, is you're going to process fewer return transactions. So as I mentioned earlier, we're probably going to warn or deny about 1% to 1.25% of your transactions, but we're going to reduce your returns by 6.25% to 8%. And that's because what happens is when somebody's warned or denied, then they don't try to make that future return transaction. As a result, you're processing fewer return transactions and you're still seeing a significant savings financially. Also, historically for our clients, they'll see a shrink reduction. Conservatively, we talk to our clients when we're implementing about 8% to 8.5%. But right now, I think our average across our client base is right around 13%. So because you're taking away the incentive for people to steal from you, and you're going to see an improvement in your shrink dollars. Well, thank you, and I hope that information was helpful, and good luck with the rest of the conference.